It started with an email. Just one. Subject line: Policy change confirmation. Finalized. I was standing at the kitchen island, still in my bathrobe, sipping coffee while sifting through promotional junk. But that email stopped me cold. It was from the insurance company we both used, same provider for years. My husband, Alan, had taken care of all that. Health, dental, and even the life insurance policies. He liked structure, predictability, said it gave him peace of mind. But this wasn't peace. This was noise. I clicked it open. At first, it looked like another one of those standard system-generated confirmations. Bland formatting, legal jargon. I almost clicked away, until I saw the line: Beneficiary update completed successfully. The updated designation is now reflected on file. My name was not mentioned anywhere. I scrolled back up, reread, scanned the footer for his name. Alan's, yes. His policy number, yes. But nothing about me. I dug through the archives. There was a previous confirmation email from 2 years ago when he renewed. Back then, it clearly said, primary beneficiary, Elaine Whitmore, spouse. Now, it didn't. There was no name at all, no spouse, no child, no estate, just the quiet erasure of my existence. At first, I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe it was a formatting glitch. Maybe they were updating systems. Or maybe Alan had meant to update something else, an address, a backup contact, and this was a coincidence. But coincidences don't send shocks down your spine. I remember just standing there, the coffee cooling in my hand, watching the cursor blink like it was judging me for standing still. My heart was already racing when I pulled out the drawer where Alan kept our important documents. That was what he called them: tax returns, mortgage papers, the dusty envelopes marked "Do not shred." Always neat, always labeled. Except one folder was new, no label. Black cover, tucked neatly behind our will. I never opened Alan's things without asking. Never. That's how we operated: respect, trust, space. But that day, something pushed me. Not curiosity, not suspicion. It was instinct. I opened it. There were only a few papers inside. A photocopy of a signed beneficiary change form, a blank post-it note, and a manila envelope sealed shut, with only 2 words handwritten in block letters, for K. I didn't open it. Not then. I sat down instead. The room spun in quiet betrayal. I thought of our daughter upstairs, still asleep in her unicorn pajamas. I thought of Alan, likely on his commute already, listening to those true crime podcasts he loved. I thought of our last conversation the night before, how mundane it was. Frozen lasagna, trash day reminders, our daughter's upcoming recital. There were no clues. But the folder in my hand said otherwise. And that sealed envelope for K. It sat there like a ticking bomb with no timer, no countdown, just silent inevitability. I didn't know who K was. I didn't know why I wasn't the beneficiary anymore. I didn't know when Alan made the change. But I knew one thing. I was never meant to find that folder. If you had asked me a month ago to describe my marriage, I would have said stable. Not passionate, not thrilling, but secure. Alan was the type of man who showed love through actions. He folded laundry without being asked, scheduled the oil change before I even noticed the warning light, brought home my favorite tea when he saw it was on sale. We were married for 12 years. We had a daughter together, Lucy, who just turned 8. We lived in a 2-story colonial house with blue shutters, the kind of home you see in neighborhood brochures, with smiling families holding golden retrievers. Ours was named Max. He passed last year, and Alan buried him in the backyard with more care than I'd seen him put into most things. Alan worked in insurance underwriting. Not glamorous, not exciting, but reliable. He left every morning at 7:45 and returned by 6:30 like clockwork. Never drank too much. Never stayed out late. Paid the bills on time. Sent thank you notes. Called his mother every Sunday. There were no late-night phone calls. No lipstick-stained collars. No sudden weekend business trips. If anything, Alan was boring. Beautifully, comfortingly boring. I remember the first time I met him. I was working part-time at a bookstore during grad school. He walked in looking for a book on estate planning, and I teased him about being 30 and already worried about dying. He smiled, but in that quiet, tight way he always did, like he was holding something in. By the time he left, I had slipped my number into the front cover of the book. He called the next day. We were married within 18 months. Alan was never the kind of man who showered you with compliments, but he showed up. Every recital, every dentist appointment, every family event. I used to joke that if I collapsed in the middle of the street, Alan would have a laminated list of emergency contacts already in his wallet. He was prepared, always prepared. When Lucy was born, he cried not loud or messy, but in a way that shook him. His hand trembled when he held her. I remember thinking, this is the man I'll grow old with. The one who will still pack my vitamins into little plastic containers when we're 70. We didn't fight much. When we did, it was quiet, measured. Alan didn't raise his voice. He just got smaller, withdrawn, like a turtle pulling into its shell. Sometimes he slept on the couch. Not because I asked, because he needed space. He'd come back the next morning with coffee and an apology. There were moments, of course, little things. I remember one time 4 years ago, I found a text on his phone from someone named Kay. It just said, "Let me know when you're free." I asked him about it. He said it was a co-worker, Catherine, from compliance. I didn't push. He never gave me a reason not to trust him. Another time, I noticed he had a second cloud drive set up. When I asked about it, he said it was for work documents he didn't want on the shared laptop. He was meticulous about separation, work, and home. He was meticulous about everything. Every month he updated our household spreadsheet. Yes, we had one. Color-coded tabs, categories, budget projections. He even set calendar alerts for property tax deadlines and water filter replacements. If I died, I joked, Alan wouldn't grieve. He'd organize a memorial checklist with optional RSVP links. And maybe that was the problem. I thought his order meant safety. I mistook routine for love. We weren't passionate, no, but we were partners. He made the bed every morning. He knew how I liked my eggs. He made sure Lucy had her allergy meds. He left sticky notes on my car dashboard when it needed gas. He once recorded every episode of my favorite old sitcom just so I'd have something to watch while I recovered from surgery. We were fine. We were functional. So when that email came, when I learned that I was no longer the person he wanted his money to go to if something happened to him, something broke, in a way I didn't expect. Because Alan was the kind of man who thought of everything. So the change, it wasn't an accident. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was deliberate. And that made me question everything we had ever been. Did he still love me? Had he stopped? Was there someone else? Or worse, had there always been? For the first time, I began to replay moments in our marriage I had once glossed over. The business trips that were extended without notice. The times he stayed up late, working on the taxes. The way he never let me touch his work laptop. I told myself I was paranoid. But the truth was beginning to unravel something inside me. Because once you realize someone you love is capable of hiding something from you, something so large, so personal, so intentional, nothing feels solid anymore. The ground beneath you shifts, and suddenly, you're not in a home anymore. You're in a lie that looks like one. I used to pride myself on being perceptive. I could read people's moods in a glance, sense tension in a room before anyone said a word. Friends came to me for advice. My sister called me her human lie detector. But now I wonder, was I really that blind? Or did I just not want to see? Looking back, the signs were there. Small at first. So small I brushed them off like dust on a picture frame. There was the way Alan started locking his phone. Not just a fingerprint, he'd added a 6-digit passcode, changed every month. When I asked about it, he said, work policy. Seemed reasonable. He worked in insurance, data protection, compliance, regulations. Still, I remember feeling a strange pang, like being shut out of a room in your own house. Then there were the nights he stayed up late. Alan used to be asleep by 10 like clockwork, snoring softly while I read beside him. But over the past year, he'd started sitting in the living room well past midnight. Laptop open, earbuds in. He said it helped him focus. Too many distractions upstairs, he told me once with a half smile. I laughed. I laughed because I believed him. Other things piled up. His reluctance to hand over his receipts for our joint budgeting. The increasing number of client dinners he'd attend alone. The way he flinched barely, but just enough when I once picked up his briefcase. There was a Saturday morning when he left early, claiming to have forgotten a meeting. When I asked which office, he said it was at a coffee shop downtown. Said the client was a bit eccentric. I remember waving him off with a smile, turning back to my tea, and never questioning it again. But now it haunts me. Why didn't I press? Why didn't I listen to the unease under my own skin? The most glaring moment came 6 months ago, on our anniversary. Alan forgot. He didn't just forget to book dinner or buy a card. He forgot entirely. That had never happened before. When I brought it up, he looked stunned, then embarrassed, then distracted. He said, "I've had a lot on my mind lately." And then he kissed my forehead like a father would to a child and went back to typing on his phone. That night, I cried in the shower, quietly, so Lucy wouldn't hear. But even then, I didn't suspect what I know now. I told myself we were tired, that life was just overwhelming, that we'd find our way back. There were emails he wouldn't let me check, passwords I didn't know anymore, phone calls he took in the garage, trips he booked without telling me until the night before. I began to feel like a guest in my own marriage, present but not participating, watching from the sidelines as the man I loved drifted further out to sea and I had no boat, no oars, not even the language to call him back. Still, I didn't confront him, because confronting means acknowledging, and I wasn't ready for the weight of that truth. Instead, I began rationalizing. He's just stressed. He's protecting me from something at work. He doesn't want to worry me. He loves me, of course, he does. He just forgets how to show it sometimes. Every lie I told myself became a brick in the wall I built to protect the illusion. I became the architect of my own denial. One night, maybe 2 months before the email, I caught a glimpse of a text on his phone. He had left it charging in the kitchen. The screen lit up with a message preview. "Kay, he asked about you again." I told him it wasn't time yet. I stood there, frozen. He walked in 2 seconds later. I pointed at the screen, asked, "Who's Kay?" He looked at it, then at me, and said without blinking, "Catherine, from legal. She's going through a messy custody thing. I've been helping her." Helping her. I nodded. I didn't ask further, because if I did, if I pushed, I was afraid of what I might find. There's something deeply human about needing the world to make sense. And when it doesn't, we twist ourselves into knots to make it seem like it does. So I twisted. I accepted that we were just in a rough patch. That every couple goes through phases. That I was imagining things, but deep down something had already shifted. The warmth in his eyes wasn't for me anymore. The pauses in his sentences weren't hesitation, they were calculations. Even Max, our old retriever, used to notice. He'd bark when Alan came home late, tail low, ears pinned back. Dogs know, and I should have too. But I didn't. Or I chose not to. Maybe both. Because facing the truth would mean accepting that I'd been living in a performance. A carefully managed illusion designed to keep me just comfortable enough not to ask questions. And that terrified me more than anything. It was 2:43 a.m. when I finally opened the envelope. I had stared at it for hours. For K, 2 uppercase letters in Alan's handwriting. The way he printed block letters always reminded me of architectural blueprints, neat, measured, intentional. There was never anything accidental about Alan's writing. My fingers trembled as I peeled the flap open. Inside was a series of neatly stacked documents. No photographs, no cards, just paperwork, legal, clean, bloodless. The first page was a change of beneficiary form, dated 7 weeks ago. I read it once, then again. My name had been scratched out and replaced. The new name, Caleb Reese Morgan. Date of birth, the 3rd of March, 2019. Relationship to insured other. Other. That single word gutted me. My eyes searched for any note, any explanation. Nothing. Just notarization. A signature. Alan's unmistakable signature. The next page was a letter of instruction addressed to the insurance company's internal team. It stated that upon Alan's death, the policy should be paid directly into a custodial trust set up under Caleb's name, managed by a woman named Kendra Alcott. I had never heard that name in my life. Attached to the letter was a copy of a trust account agreement. The trustees were listed as Kendra and a legal firm located in Seattle, miles away from where we lived in Connecticut. There was a clause that stunned me. This trust is to be administered for the full benefit of Caleb Reese Morgan until he reaches the age of 25. At no point is the mother to be considered a beneficiary. So he planned for the child, but not the woman. That somehow made it worse. The fourth document was a sealed envelope. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. It was addressed not to me, but to Caleb. But I opened it anyway. It was a letter. 2 pages. Handwritten. Caleb, you may never read this, or maybe by the time you do, I'm no longer around to explain myself. But I want you to know, I thought of you every day since I first saw you. You didn't ask for this situation. None of this is your fault. I wasn't brave enough to tell the truth. I should have been. But I made promises I couldn't keep to both you and to my family. This policy is my way of doing something right, even if it's far too late. I hope when you grow up, you'll understand why I did what I did. And I hope, God, I hope you never think I didn't love you. I always did. I dropped the pages like they burned. The silence in the room was suffocating. The only sound was the refrigerator humming, like it was mocking me for not hearing the truth sooner. I sat on the floor, documents splayed around me like wreckage from a crash. Caleb, a 5-year-old boy. Alan Sohn. I didn't know how long I stayed there. Time had fractured into a strange stillness. I felt like I was outside my own body, watching a version of myself slowly disintegrate. I tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to move. But the questions came first. Who was Kendra? How long had he known her? Had they been in love? Was Caleb a result of an affair, or something deeper, something more lasting? I pulled my laptop over, heart pounding, and typed Kendra Alcott into the search bar. At first, nothing concrete. A few scattered LinkedIn profiles. A dentist in Oregon. A yoga instructor. A public records listing in Seattle. But then, I found an old blog. Life After the Rain. Last updated 3 years ago. The header read, One Mama's Journey Through Single Parenthood, Messy Grace, and Raising a Boy with Wonder. I clicked About Me. My name is Kendra. I'm a single mom to a curious, bug-loving, question-asking boy named Caleb. We live in Seattle. This blog is a journal, a time capsule, and sometimes a scream into the void. Her photo was there too. And that's when it hit me. I knew her. Not well. But I'd met her once. A conference Alan and I had attended together 6 years ago. She was one of the event organizers. I remember because she wore bright red shoes and carried a planner covered in stickers. I had joked about how organized she was. I never saw them talk. I never saw anything. But now I wondered, had it started then? I scrolled down her blog. Posts about motherhood, raising a child with asthma, struggling with co-parenting boundaries. She never mentioned Alan by name. But there were hints, tiny footprints leading to a secret trail. One post in particular stopped me cold. Titled, The Stranger Who Became a Shadow. Some people enter your life quietly, like fog. You don't notice them at first, but then one day, you realize you've built an entire season around their absence. And even when they disappear, you still keep checking the door. I didn't know if that was about Alan, but I felt it in my bones. The next morning, I didn't sleep. I didn't cook breakfast. I didn't wake Lucy. I sat in the living room, folder in my lap, waiting for Alan to come home from his morning run. He walked through the door at 7:12, towels slung over his neck, earbuds still in. I said nothing at first. He looked at me, confused. You're up early. I lifted the folder, held it in both hands like a weapon. His face changed. Not confusion, recognition, and then fear. That's when I knew. He never thought I'd find it. He never meant for me to know. And worst of all, he wasn't sorry I did. He didn't speak at first. When I held up the folder, Alan just stood there, frozen, like a man caught in the middle of a heist who realizes the cameras were on the whole time. His mouth opened slightly. No words, no excuses, no panic, just a quiet flicker of resignation. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I only said 4 words. Who is the boy? He closed the front door slowly behind him, placed his keys in the ceramic dish by the entryway like it was just another Tuesday morning. Then he walked past me, sat down on the edge of the couch, and stared at the floor. I was going to tell you, he said. His voice was calm, careful, that insurance agent tone of control. Tell me when, I asked, barely above a whisper. After he turned 18? He looked up at me, and there it was, the flicker. The thing I hadn't seen in his eyes in years. Guilt, not regret. Guilt. Because regret means you wish things had gone differently. Guilt means you knew exactly what you were doing and did it anyway. I met her before we got married, he said. But it was nothing. We weren't serious. I didn't even know she was pregnant until years later. I didn't believe him. Not because I thought he was a liar. Alan wasn't sloppy enough to lie. But because his version of the truth was always tailored, strategic, sanitized. I sat across from him, knees trembling, and dropped the letter, the one he wrote to Caleb on the coffee table. You wrote him a goodbye. You told him you thought of him every day, and now you're telling me it was nothing. His face tightened. He's my son, he said. I had to make sure he'd be okay. I let the silence do the screaming. You have a daughter, I finally said. You have Lucy, the child you eat dinner with, take to piano lessons, tuck in every night. When were you planning to make sure she was okay? He didn't answer. Instead, he asked something so bizarre, so misplaced, that I still don't understand what part of him thought it was appropriate. Did you go through my files? I laughed, out loud. It was sharp and humorless and acidic. That's what you're worried about? Privacy? I leaned forward. You changed your beneficiary to a child I didn't know existed. You created a trust fund in Seattle. You've been sending money behind my back. And you're asking if I opened your folder? Steele. No apology. Just that same steady voice. I was protecting everyone. There it was. The ultimate illusion. That betrayal can be reframed as heroism if it's done quietly. But I wasn't interested in his performance. I wanted to know everything. So I pressed. Is Kendra the woman from that conference in Boston? His eyes flickered. Yes. It wasn't spoken. But I didn't need him to say it. I remembered her now. Red shoes. Bright laugh. A clipboard in one hand. A latte in the other. She had joked with me in the buffet line. Asked about Lucy back then. Just a toddler. Said Alan was lucky to have such a glowing wife. And I had smiled, completely unaware I was shaking hands with the woman who would one day mother my husband's other child. The realization hit me like ice. You knew her before that, I said slowly. You didn't just meet her at the conference, did you? Alan didn't respond. I leaned closer. How long, Alan? A beat, 2, then, on and off. A few years, it ended. Before or after Caleb was born? Before, he lied. I knew it was a lie. Because the documents didn't lie. The dates didn't lie. The trust was established within 2 months of the boy's birth. The insurance changes came after Alan visited Seattle for a client onboarding. I remembered that trip. He'd brought back a t-shirt for Lucy Space Needle on the front, too big for her frame. She wore it to bed for weeks. He had smiled when he gave it to her. Smiled like he wasn't carrying an entire second life in his luggage. I stood up. My body felt too big for my skin, like I couldn't contain the heat of my own fury. Do you love him? I asked. It was a ridiculous question, but I needed to hear the lie. I care about him, he said. Another half-truth. And her? Silence? That silence said more than any confession. Alan didn't fall in love with Kendra. He stayed in love with her. And I had been the intermission, the safe choice. The woman who tucked his shirts, packed his lunches, made his life respectable. But not remarkable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the letter at him, to burn the folder, to throw every single carefully constructed spreadsheet of his off the roof. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered now. Does Lucy know? He blinked. No, he said. Of course not. I nodded. Well, she's going to. And I walked out. Not far, just to the backyard, where Max was buried, where I could cry without Lucy hearing, where Alan's perfect life didn't reach. There, I sat on the wooden bench he built during lockdown, the one with uneven legs and crooked armrests. It had always been too low to the ground. I had once called it his first failure. Now it felt like the only honest thing he ever made. I always thought that if something like this ever happened, if my husband cheated, lied, lived a double life, I'd fall apart, cry in bed for days, rage, throw plates, call my sister, my therapist, my priest, anyone. I imagined chaos, noise, collapse. But that's not what happened. What happened was silence, stillness, precision. The morning after I found out everything, Caleb, Kendra, the trust, I didn't scream. I didn't pack my bags. I didn't pour wine and make dramatic declarations. Instead, I logged into my laptop at 6 a.m., opened a new spreadsheet, and wrote at the top, exit strategy. 12 years of marriage had taught me how Alan operated. He respected order, evidence, documentation. So I gave him exactly that, and I made sure he wouldn't see it coming. The first thing I did was make a copy of every document in the folder, then scanned and saved it to a private cloud drive he didn't know existed. I also took pictures of the envelope, the letter to Caleb, the beneficiary change forms, and emailed them to myself using a new account. Then I opened a checking account in my name only. I hadn't had one since we got married. Everything had always been ours. The house, the money, the car, even our savings were joint. Alan liked it that way. Said it was cleaner. I had agreed. At the time, it felt romantic. Now, I saw it for what it was: strategic dependency. So I quietly cut the cord. Within the first 72 hours, I transferred a small, undetectable amount of money into the new account, called a lawyer friend from college, and asked for a confidential consultation, began listing every shared asset we had, installed a password manager, and changed every login I could think of. By day 4, I had access to everything: our mortgage statements, our insurance history, Alan's 401k, even the metadata on the files from the folder. Turns out, most of them were generated months before he claimed to have found out about Caleb. The lies were deeper, older. I started wearing a mask around Alan. Still smiled at the dinner table. Still kissed him goodnight. Still laughed when Lucy told her silly stories about school. He didn't suspect a thing. In fact, I think he was relieved. Relieved that I wasn't acting crazy. Relieved that I had processed it maturely. Relieved that I hadn't told Lucy. Not yet, but I was no longer his wife. I was reconnaissance. I was preparing for war. I called the insurance company and requested an official statement of the policy's beneficiary change. Said I needed it for financial planning. They sent it within a day. I printed it, highlighted the date, and added it to the folder I had started for the lawyer. I contacted a forensic accountant. That part made me laugh. Alan had no idea that the woman who once cried over balancing a grocery list was now preparing to audit his life. I found 3 unreported accounts. Small, not hidden exactly, but omitted from our financial conversations. One of them had routine payments to a debit card in Kendra's name. Another was tied to an Airbnb booking in Seattle that aligned exactly with the weekend he claimed to be attending a regional underwriting summit. He never even changed the password. His security question was still, "What's your favorite book?" I remember when we set that up. He said The Great Gatsby, because he admired the way Gatsby built his world from the ground up. Ironic, really. Gatsby built a castle for a woman who never truly loved him. Alan built 2 lives and lost both. When I met with the lawyer Anika, sharp-eyed and unsentimental, she looked at the files and said, "You have enough to destroy him." I nodded. I don't want to destroy him. I just want to make sure he can't rewrite this. Because that's what men like Alan do. They create their own version of the story. One where they're the misunderstood hero, caught in a difficult situation, forced to make hard choices. Not this time. This time, I was the narrator. By the second week, I started separating my digital presence, created a new email, canceled subscriptions, deleted photos from shared albums, removed location tracking from our devices. He noticed, once, "Did you change your Spotify login?" "Yeah," I said. "I was getting weird recommendations." He nodded. Didn't push. Of course he didn't. He thought I was healing. He thought silence meant surrender. But silence is where I sharpened the knife. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. Not yet. I needed it airtight. No gossip. No interference. No sympathy. Just leverage. And then, one night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened Alan's work laptop. He had left it on the kitchen counter. I waited until he went upstairs. I knew his password. He always used some variation of Lucy's birthday. This one was LU3Y 0315. Inside was a folder titled Legacy Planning. Within it, documents dated back 3 years. Emails with legal advisors, a PDF of a drafted will, notes about discrete asset reallocation. There was even a memo to himself. Explore limited guardianship options if Elaine is unfit. I stopped breathing. Unfit. The man who spent every night letting me do the bedtime stories, every morning praising my parenting to his coworkers, had considered legally challenging my right to raise our daughter if it came to that. That wasn't just betrayal. That was premeditation. I closed the laptop, wiped the browser history, returned it to its exact position. The next morning, I made pancakes. Told Lucy we'd go to the zoo that weekend. Laughed when Alan made a joke about flamingos. But inside, something final clicked into place. I had become someone he didn't recognize. Because the woman he married, soft-spoken, trusting, deferential, no longer existed. In her place was someone sharper, quieter, exacting. A woman who would not let him walk away unscathed. I didn't tell him I was leaving. I didn't scream, or break things, or write some grand emotional letter. I didn't even slam the door. When it finally happened, when the exit I'd been planning for weeks became real, it was almost quiet. That morning, I made Lucy's lunch like always. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a juice box. I braided her hair while she told me a story about a spelling bee at school. Alan had already left for work an early strategy meeting, he said, which was perfect. I had the whole house to myself. I waited until the school bus pulled away before I moved. The night before, I had already packed what I needed. 1 large suitcase, 1 tote bag. I didn't take everything I didn't need to. I wasn't running. I was reclaiming. I left the wedding album, the matching mugs, the framed photo of us from Maui that had sat on the hallway table for over a decade. I didn't need the relics of a life built on omissions. What I took were the things that mattered now. Lucy's birth certificate, my diplomas, the insurance papers, the files from Alan's laptop, and the letter to Caleb. I placed that letter in a separate envelope and tucked it into the lining of my bag. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it reminded me of the version of Alan that only ever existed on paper, measured, meticulous, and always just out of reach. Before I walked out, I did one last thing. I placed a note on the kitchen counter. Not a letter, not an explanation, just a message he would understand in its simplicity and finality. You knew what you were doing. So do I. E. Then I turned off the lights, locked the front door, and left the keys in the mailbox. I didn't cry. Not then. I got into the car and drove to my sister's house an hour away. She didn't know what was coming. I hadn't told her anything yet, needed it that way. I didn't want interference. I didn't want comfort. I wanted control. When she opened the door and saw me standing there with my suitcase and Lucy's backpack, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a hug and whispered, "Okay, you're okay. Whatever it is, we've got you." That's when I cried. Not for Alan, not for the marriage, not even for Caleb. I cried for all the years I'd spent erasing my instincts in favor of Alan's explanations. I cried for the woman I used to be, naive, hopeful, certain that a spreadsheet could protect a heart from being broken. That night, Lucy slept in the guest room with her favorite blanket. She asked why we were staying at Aunt Caroline's, Evan. I told her, "We're just taking a little time to ourselves." She nodded. Kids know more than we give them credit for. As I lay awake in that unfamiliar bed, I pictured Alan coming home, finding the note, the empty closet, the silence. I imagined him calling me, texting, searching for the version of me who would pick up and explain, the version of me who'd still believe him. But I had vanished. Not into smoke, not into bitterness, but into clarity. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was strategy. It was survival. The next morning, I filed for separation. My lawyer sent the notice to Alan's office directly. The email included attachments of the evidence, the trust documents, the altered policy, and a formal request for a freeze on all joint assets until the divorce proceedings. He didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. When he finally did 3 days later, he didn't ask where I was. He asked if I'd told anyone. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't owe him anything anymore. Not my explanations. Not my whereabouts. Not even my rage. He said he hoped we could talk this through for Lucy's sake. I reminded him that Lucy had only ever had one parent fully present in her life. He hung up. That night, I took Lucy for ice cream. She giggled when it dripped onto her dress. We walked through the park as the sun dipped below the trees, and for the first time in what felt like years, I breathed. Really breathed. I wasn't in hiding. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't unraveling. I was free. The first time I saw Alan again after I left, he was standing in my sister's driveway holding a bouquet of daisies and a manila envelope. I was in the kitchen, drying dishes, when Caroline peeked through the blinds and muttered, "You've got company." He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, emotionally. Like the scaffolding that once held him together had started to rot, and only the suit was keeping him upright. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. "I don't want to make a scene," he said. "Then don't," I replied, arms crossed. He nodded, looked down at the flowers, then offered them like they were a white flag. I didn't take them. "I just wanted to talk," he continued, face to face. I waited. "I know you're angry," he said, "but I think if we could just have one honest conversation, we could figure this out." Figure it out. Like this was a scheduling conflict. "I think everything's already been figured out," I said. "You figured out how to create a secret trust. You figured out how to rewrite your will. You figured out how to protect one child while abandoning another." His face twitched, like he'd been slapped. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is lying to your wife for years and then expecting her to play mediator for your conscience." He exhaled hard and stepped closer. "Elaine, I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean our marriage was fake." He tilted my head. "Doesn't it?" His voice rose just slightly. "I did love you. I still do." I laughed once, sharp and quick. "You don't get to say that now." He tried again. "I didn't want to lose Lucy. I was trying to provide for both of them." "You were trying to control everything," I interrupted. "Even now, standing here, this is about you, not her, not me. You want to be the good guy in a story you set on fire." He was quiet for a long time. Then he held out the manila envelope. "I brought the original policy documents. Everything you asked for. I also signed over the car and agreed to your terms on the house." I didn't reach for it. "I'm not bribing you," he added. "I'm trying to prove I'm not your enemy." I stared at him. "You stopped being my enemy the day I stopped caring what you wanted." His shoulders slumped. "I'd like to see Lucy." "That's not my decision alone," I said. "It's the court's. Talk to your lawyer." There was a beat of silence before he asked, softer now, "Do you hate me?" I blinked. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I realized I didn't even feel close to hate. "No," I said. "I don't hate you. I see you. That's worse." He flinched, just slightly. "Goodbye, Alan." He opened his mouth like he had something more to say, then closed it. He walked back to his car, slowly, defeated. As he pulled away, I realized something strange. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel powerful. I felt done. Not empty, not angry, just finished. Later that night, he sent an email. I told her everything. She says she doesn't want child support, just clarity. I think she knew the whole time that I couldn't live two lives forever. I'm sorry it took me this long to realize what I lost. I didn't respond. The next morning, a delivery arrived, certified mail. Inside was the finalized agreement Alan had signed. Property division, custody outline, child support, no contest. Attached was a post-it in his handwriting. You were right. You always were. I threw it in the trash. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was trying to revise the narrative, to reshape the betrayal into something noble, complicated, forgivable. But I wasn't giving him that luxury. He had written two versions of his life, one with me, one with her, and assumed neither would intersect. He'd believed that silence was a shield, that omission was mercy. But truth doesn't disappear just because you hide it in a locked drawer. It waits. It waits for the day it's found. And when it is, it rewrites you. I thought I'd feel something when the divorce was finalized. Relief, maybe, or some triumphant echo of justice. But when the papers arrived, signed, stamped, filed, the feeling wasn't victory. It was silence. Like someone had turned off the last light in a house I no longer lived in. Lucy was sitting on the floor of the living room that afternoon, drawing a picture of 3 stick figures under a purple sun. She held it up proudly and said, "This is me, you, and Max." Our old dog, Alan, wasn't in the picture. I asked her gently, "Why isn't Daddy there?" She shrugged. "Because this is our now picture, not our before one, out of the mouths of children." That night, I called Alan. Not because I missed him, not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I needed to end it properly. Not with paperwork or legal jargon, but with truth. He answered on the second ring. "I wasn't expecting to hear from you," he said. "Don't talk," I said. "Just listen." A pause. Then, "Okay." I took a breath. "You didn't just betray me, Alan. You rewrote our history without asking if I wanted to live in the edited version. You built a second life and assumed I'd be grateful to remain in the footnotes. You didn't fall in love with someone else. You fell in love with the idea that you could get away with it." He didn't interrupt. "You say you loved me. Maybe you did, maybe in your way. But love isn't measured by the flowers you bring home or the bills you pay. It's in the truth you share, the choices you don't make behind someone's back." Still, he said nothing. I continued. "You didn't just lie to me. You lied to Lucy. You denied her a version of her father that could have been honest, even if imperfect. And now, one day, I'll have to explain to her why her college fund is smaller than Caleb's. Why her dad wrote letters to a boy he never visited but couldn't look his own daughter in the eye and tell her the truth." He swallowed hard. "I will never hate you. That would mean you still had that kind of power over me. But I will never respect you again. And you need to live with that." He finally spoke, quietly. "I do." "Good," I said. "Then we're done." And I hung up. That was my closure. Not slamming doors. Not public shaming. Just the truth. Unvarnished and final. A week later, I received an email from Kendra. Subject line: "I'm sorry." I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. "Elaine, I don't expect a response. But I needed to say this. I didn't know Alan was still with you when we reconnected. He told me your marriage was ending, that you were separated emotionally, even if not legally. I was naive. I wanted to believe him. And when I found out the truth, I had already let Caleb believe he had a father. I'm not proud of what I allowed, but I never wanted to take anything from you. I hope one day you'll believe that. K." I didn't reply. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. And in that quiet, something inside me healed, not all at once, but slowly, like a wound that had finally been left alone long enough to scab. Because closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a decision. A decision to stop carrying someone else's story like it's your burden. The first thing I did was change the beneficiary back. It sounds small, almost petty, but it wasn't. It was symbolic. I called the insurance company and told them to remove Caleb from the policy. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because it was mine now. My name, my choices, my life. And for once, I wasn't managing someone else's consequences. After that, I updated my will. I added a clause that Lucy should never be forced to bear the weight of her father's legacy, that she deserved freedom, not guilt, that she should never have to wonder if she was enough. I opened a college account in her name, under my name only. Small, modest, but real, built from scratch, like the version of myself I was finally becoming. I started therapy. The first session, I cried before I even sat down. The therapist didn't rush me. She just handed me a tissue and said, "It's okay, you're not late, you're right on time." And slowly, piece by piece, I reclaimed the things I had given away over the years. My time, my choices, my voice. I stopped asking for permission to feel angry. I stopped explaining why I left. I stopped apologizing for wanting peace more than partnership. Lucy and I moved into a small rental home, just the two of us. The kitchen was outdated, and the tiles creaked, but it had sunlight in the windows and a lemon tree in the yard. She called it our magic house. We painted her room white. We bought mismatched furniture from thrift shops. We danced barefoot in the living room while spaghetti boiled on the stove. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Sometimes she asks about her dad. I never do, but I don't poison her either. I say he made mistakes, but he loved her. And I leave it at that, because she'll grow up, and one day she'll have her own questions. When she's ready, I'll tell her the full story. But for now, I protect her the way I finally learned to protect myself, with truth and with grace. I don't hear from Alan anymore, not directly. He sends birthday cards, checks, occasionally an email with a subject line like, "Update on Caleb," or "New job, FYI. I don't reply, not because I'm bitter, but because I don't need anything from him anymore. Not validation, not permission, not closure. I've already closed the chapter. Sometimes I still think about the woman I used to be, the one who color-coded grocery lists and stayed quiet during late-night silences, the one who believed that loyalty meant shrinking, who confused peace with numbness. I don't miss her, but I honor her. She did the best she could with the version of the truth she had. And now I'm living a version where I write the plans, where my future is no longer a folder tucked into someone else's drawer, where love doesn't require invisibility. This isn't revenge. It's rebirth. And for the first time in a long time, my future plan finally includes me.